My name is David Malonti. I'm the Assistant Director in the non-public school ombudsman at the Kentucky Department of Education. I should say Assistant Director in the Division of School and Program Improvement. We have been tasked with carrying out a good portion of this program, but along with us, we have Matthew Courtney, who is our policy advisor. We have staff from the Division of Budgets and Financial Management who are tasked with another major portion of this program, and those staff are Karen Worth and Thelma Hawkins. Those three people are going to jump in at points and help with some answers and explanations. We do have everybody muted today. We ask that as you have questions that you put them in the chat. We're either going to be responding to those as they come up in the chat, or we may have some of those responses verbally as well. Just for today's training, this is to really get you all familiar with the purpose of the EANS program. We're going to talk a little bit about some background about the program, talk about the applicant eligibility requirements. We're going to talk about responsibilities for the applicant versus the Kentucky Department of Education. And we're going to look at application requirements and talk a little bit about the submission process. We will at the end have a review of the application we sent with our initial communication, and also available on our EANS webpage. There's posted a draft copy of the application that is specifically for you to use right now for planning. We'll talk about how those applications will be submitted later on down the road, and give you an idea of what you should be doing right now to prepare yourselves for that submission process. Just to give you some background of the EANS program, it was passed as I've got to escape for just a second. Forgot to push the record button. Let me do that really quickly. Oh, it's going great. The EANS program was passed as part of the second round of the governor's emergency education relief funding. You'll hear that referred to quite often as GEAR funding. That was part of the second round of CARES Act emergency assistance. It is designed to provide reimbursement or services to eligible non-public schools with the intent of tackling those impacts of COVID-19. The governor received and allocated to the Department of Education about $40 million to carry services out and provide reimbursements. So that's quite a bit of money that we do have. We have set some caps, as you'll see at the bottom, for planning purposes, at least tentatively. We are planning to fund based on two different measures: $400 for each student enrolled, an additional $250 for each low-income student enrolled. You'll see where you have to provide those numbers later on to us as part of the application process. And those numbers, along with the per pupil amounts, should be used for planning purposes. The next to last bullet there says funds generally are not directly provided to applicants, with the exception of if you are asking for reimbursements for certain activities. We may be able to provide you some reimbursement with additional documentation. We'll talk a little bit about that in a bit. So we'll talk a little bit about the types of assistance available. For the most part, these are very similar to what you would have found in the first round of the CARES Act under the ESSER program. So under this round of the gear under EANS, you are allowed to buy supplies to sanitize, disinfect, and clean school facilities. You can buy personal protective equipment. It is allowable to improve ventilation systems, including windows or air purification systems. You can provide training and professional development for staff on the sanitation, use of personal protective equipment, and on how to minimize the spread of infectious diseases. You can provide physical barriers to facilitate social distancing, and then other materials, supplies, or equipment recommended by the CDC for reopening and operation of school facilities to effectively maintain health and safety. The CDC has provided quite a vast range of guidance. You can go to the CDC webpage or search on Google for CDC school reopening, and generally you'll be able to easily find their recommendations for opening and maintaining school facilities. There is possibility to expand capacity to administer coronavirus testing to effectively monitor and suppress the virus. Continued, there is a possibility to provide educational technology, redeveloping instructional plans for remote or hybrid learning or to address learning loss, leasing sites or space to ensure social distancing, reasonable transportation costs, again, associated with the impacts caused by COVID-19, initiating and maintaining education and support services or assistance for remote or hybrid learning or to address learning loss. You see learning loss there a couple times. That was something that was a focal point under this particular program. And reimbursement for the expenses of any services or assistance described above that a non-public school incurred on or after March 13th, 2020. Just to clarify, reimbursements can happen in a couple ways. One, you can be reimbursed for things that you have purchased back to March 13, 2020 out of your own funding. This is not to include things that you have been reimbursed for under, for example, the payroll protection program. So you can go back in time, look at expenditures for things that you have paid for out of your own non-public schools accounts, and then ask for reimbursements for those things. You can ask also in your application for reimbursement for activities or things moving forward. So if in your plan you're gonna, you need additional technology and you want to get that over the summer, for example, you can request reimbursement for those things. And that is for those of you that have worked with federal programs before. Generally, regulation does not allow for reimbursements to non-public schools, but statutorily under this program, it is an allowable method of administering services. Matthew, anything at this point to add to that piece of the conversation?
Not at this time.
Okay, great. Okay, to kind of finish up the types of assistance available, the U.S. Department of Education has stated in their non-regulatory guidance that these 5 things are not allowed to be reimbursed. So improvements to ventilation systems, any expenses, again, reimbursed through a loan guaranteed under the payroll protection program. Staff training and professional development on sanitation, the use of PPE, and minimizing the spread of COVID-19. Developing instructional plans, including curriculum development for remote or hybrid learning or to address learning loss, and initiating and maintaining education and support services for hybrid learning or to address learning loss, remote or hybrid learning. So those, I think, make a note of that, are things that USED again has said are not allowed to be reimbursed. There are some requirements in order to be able to apply for this particular program. So you must be a non-public or homeschool wishing to apply, and you must serve students in grades K to 12. So we really had to do some clarification and seek an answer from USED on that particular topic. You can serve any grades from K to 12. You know, if you're a K to 5 school, a K to 8 school, you can still apply. However, non-public preschools who are standalone entities are not eligible to apply. Now, with that being said, the U.S. Department of Education did say that a non-public preschool that is part of an elementary school could be served under the award that's made to that non-public school. However, if there is a non-public standalone preschool, it would not be able to apply for this particular program. I need to clarify just right off the bat that when you are entering your counts or your enrollment counts and low income counts for your application, you should not be counting preschool students as part of your enrollment or low income. So those kids can be served as part of a preschool, but should not be counted as part of your enrollment and low income counts. You must be nonprofit. Just a note here, in Kentucky, homeschools are considered to be nonprofit by nature as long as they are not charging tuition for services. We do have some homeschools that may take in children from the surrounding area and may charge tuition or a fee for services. In that case, that homeschool would have to be certified as a nonprofit entity. You must be accredited, licensed, or the real phrase here that is important to Kentucky, or otherwise operate in accordance with state law. Another note here, non-public schools are approved to operate within Kentucky without accreditation, licensure, or certification. Okay. So as a non-public school, you must have been in existence prior to March 13th, 2020. That is the date the president declared the national emergency due to COVID-19. That rule is the same as it was under CARES Act number 1. And you must not have applied and will not apply and receive a loan under the Small Business Administration's Paycheck Protection Program that is made on or after December 27th, 2020. Now, you could be a recipient of the PPP loan prior to December 27th, but you cannot be a recipient after December 27th. We're going to talk a little bit about applicant responsibilities. As an applicant, you must complete an application that will include information such as contact information, some assigned certification and assurances, and that certification and those assurances essentially are there to ensure that you are providing accurate information. You have to provide total student enrollment. Again, those are from grades 12, K to 12, and low income data for students K to 12. We will ask you to provide some information about participation in the Payroll Protection Program prior to December 27th, 2020, and submit a W-9 and an easy vendor application. We have those posted with instructions on how to submit those on our EANS webpage, but I'm going to give Karen a chance to talk about those a little bit.
Thanks, David. So the easy vendor application is pretty simple to fill out. The directions, like David said, will be included with the form and on the EANS website. And basically what that does is that allows you to be listed as a vendor in our financial system that we use to procure and to pay vendors. So those documents, if they can be submitted early, that would be great, because it takes a little bit of a process for us to submit the paperwork. It takes outside external approval from our finance and administration cabinet. So just to make sure that we have enough time, we would just suggest that if you could go ahead and complete those documents, get them sent to the email box that will be listed with the information, so we could go ahead and get started on those. So thank you, David.
Yeah, again, that's going to help speed up the award and processing time frame. In the application, you are going to have to talk about the impact of COVID-19 on your non-public school. That's very important because the things that you have to request have to align with that particular impact. You're going to tell us whether or not you participated under the first round of the coronavirus relief and Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act. That's CARES. That's under ESSER and GEAR from round one. You may have to do some research, because we will ask you if you did participate, how much money in services that you received from those programs. So if you're not sure about that figure exactly, you'll probably need to go back to the school district that served you under that first round of CARES. This program is a little bit different. You are not going to be interacting with school districts for GEAR under the EANS program, but you may have to go back if you were served under the first round to figure out how much in services you received. You'll have to define reimbursement services requested, the needs that those requests will meet, and the amount requested for each. And we'll take a look a little more in depth at the application just to see how that looks at the end. So some special considerations as you're planning for your application submission. We are on a very tight deadline that is set in the statute that basically gives us 30 days to approve and make awards, and then 6 months to have those expenditures based on those awards obligated. So for the application process, we will not have much time to go back and forth with private schools for clarification. There may be some opportunities or instances where we have to ask some questions, but as far as amending budgets back and forth, we have a very tight timeline to get those things approved or denied, and then to award amounts for services. So pay particular attention to these. Applications that fail to provide all required information, including the completion of each application section, will be deemed non-responsive and funding will not be provided. That includes things such as uploads that you have to provide, signature pages, ensuring all of your narratives and budgeting all those sections are complete. We do not guarantee any base amount of funding, just based on your application submission. We do not guarantee that if you just turn in an application that you are going to be funded at any point. Again, you have to make sure that your application is complete. And we have set the tentative per pupil amount so that we feel pretty comfortable that, no matter how many schools, non-public schools we have apply for this funding, that we think we'll be able to serve them based on those per pupil amounts. The final bullet here says applicants must be open to consultation with the Department of Education. That is going to be important because there may be some additional documentation we have to collect from you on the back end. We may have questions for you on the back end or even during application review, and we need to ensure that everybody is open to answering the phone or responding to an email, things of that nature. Something else you need to be aware of is that the assistance or services you request must be reasonable, necessary, and allocable. We have recruited some staff across the department to help us with scoring these applications or reviewing them. And these are some of the things we'll ask them to look for. So I've given you the definition for each of these. These are generally set in the education department's regulations in uniform grant guidance. Reasonable means that something is not excessive in cost and it's based on prudent and sound purchasing practices. So when you are budgeting for items and thinking, hey, I would like to have this piece of technology, it would be good to look at 2 or 3 sources in order to get an estimate of what those things are going to cost. To give you a really extreme example of this, a couple of years ago, I had a school district in one of its programs asked to purchase a laptop cart, something that you store and charge your laptops in, and it's mobile from classroom to classroom. They requested an amount for one cart that was $10,000. So the first thing that my staff and I did was we went to Google and searched up laptop carts. You can go hit the shopping button and you can compare all kinds of prices for laptop carts. And what we found was $10,000 for a laptop cart was not even close to reasonable, not even close to the average cost for what a laptop cart should be able to be bought for. So we had to deny that particular purchase. Again, that's a pretty extreme case, but wanted to throw that out for example. In addition, the purchases that you budget for should be deemed necessary or essential for carrying out the needs-based assistance associated with COVID-19 impacts. In other words, when you define the impacts, we're going to train our staff to look at what you budgeted for and how you describe how you're going to meet those impacts with the assistance you are requesting. And then they must be allocable. So the cost, number one, it fits into one of the allowable cost activities categories. And 2, it meets the intent of the EANS program. And again, the intent of the program is to respond to or prepare for impacts due to COVID-19. So on our end, what are our responsibilities? Well, number one, we have to communicate with and provide assistance to applicants. We've done that by sending out an initial communication. We have worked with some associations in the state who are helping us to distribute those communications. We've asked school districts to help in spreading that message. We've basically given them some text and asked them to distribute that. We have set up, again, the EANS website. So that is there for you to use. I'll show you how to get there in a little bit. And we are providing these webinars to help with application submission. So we must receive and evaluate applications for quality, consistency with allowed expenditures, reasonableness, and connection to program intent. Again, we've recruited some staff across the department to help us in that review, and we'll be training them in the near future on what to look for. We have to allocate reimbursements and provide for services. We have to inventory materials and equipment. So here's a very important point. Non-consumable materials and equipment remain the property of KDE. And in addition to that, KDE must assume title to non-consumable materials and equipment for which a non-public school receives reimbursement or which is purchased. So if you have bought some technology out of your own school's money and you would like that to be reimbursed, you need to keep in mind that if we reimburse for that, the department actually takes title to those pieces of equipment. That's important. Same thing goes for if you ask us to administer services for you and you want us to purchase something that is non-consumable, for example, we automatically retain title to those things as well. So that's a very important point to consider when you are thinking about administering services versus reimbursements. The thing about that is we will be allowing you to use those non-consumables until one of two things occurs. One, that those pieces of equipment have reached the end of their useful life, or two, you just do not have a need for those particular items anymore. Okay, so that could be, you could have those things for years in the future. However, we have to inventory those things in case either of those criteria are met. Because at that point, we have to reclaim those items and dispose of those appropriately. So if you have been reading on the EANS website or in the initial communication, we are going to officially open the application from March 23rd to the 26th. Applications will not be accepted beyond that closing date. And that's why we are saying we've given you that draft application to begin preparing now. What we're going to ask you to do is on the 23rd through the 26th, we will open a SurveyMonkey link. And if you have some responses prepared ahead of time, you'll be able to take your responses and essentially copy and paste them right into the SurveyMonkey platform. That platform, again, is not open yet. We did provide a link within the initial communication, and there will be a link provided on the EANS webpage. Once received, applications will be scored and assistance awarded again within 30 days. And funds again must be obligated for services within 6 months. So I do want to open up a web page here, and it's outside of what's listed on this particular page, but I do want to mention that the U.S. Department of Education does have a couple of useful resources. One is their guidance, and the second piece of that is their EANS website with additional information. Also, I want to mention that any questions should be sent to this specific mailbox. This is one of the mailboxes that I monitor quite frequently, and originally it was set up for my ombudsman work, but we are accepting questions through that mailbox at any time. I would urge you to really take a look at the application and the guidance that we have provided up to this point, and ask questions early. We are trying to respond to those, or I'm trying to respond to those within the day. But yesterday I received about 15. I was able to get those out the door and responses handled, but if I'm getting more than that, it may be a day or so before I can get back to you. So the earlier you can get questions into me, whether it's specific, whether it's just general about the program, whether it's, just to find, where can I find something, the earlier you get them to me, the better off we're going to be. Matthew, I'm going to stop for just a second and show them the EANS web page, if that's okay. Oops. I'm going to pull that up. And reshare my screen. Not that one. Here we go. So in order to get to that EANS web page, the first thing you should do is just go to the KDE main page, and that's education.ky.gov. Okay, you can get there by just education.ky.gov. You'll find a search box on the right side of that page, and if you type in EANS and just hit enter or search, it should be the very first link that comes up for you. And if you click that link, here's our page. Okay, we start off in the middle with some introductory information, very similar to what you saw within the initial communication, or the communication you got from the school district as we asked them to send that out. At the bottom, there is some, there are a couple links to some US Ed information. Again, their guidance and their web page, and then there's contact information for sending any questions. On the right-hand side, what you'll see is application materials. So again, you have that application for planning, that draft application, the W-9 tax form, the easy vendor registration, the EANS signature page. There's a copy of our PowerPoint slides that we've used yesterday and today, and then some instructions for early submission of the W-9 and easy vendor registration, including an email address to which you can submit. We also have, again, over here, some additional resources, including the governor's, the GEAR Fund Part 2 fact sheet. Thelma, Matthew, or Karen, do you have anything to add to that?
I would just add on this page, if you haven't downloaded a fresh copy of the application for planning, you should do so. We had to add a question due to some guidance, and there are a couple of typos. So the version on this web page is the most current version.
Yep. So I'm just going to open up from here, if that's okay. Do we have any questions before we go on through the application that we need to address verbally?
Not yet. I think we can keep going.
Okay. So I opened up just from that link to give you an idea of what's in the application. It'll look just like this within SurveyMonkey. It'll have, first of all, the cover page and introductory materials. Again, that talks a little bit about the background of the program, talks about who is eligible and the allowable types of expenditures. Again, it talks about the items or things that USAID says cannot be reimbursed. And then we kind of get into the meat and potatoes here. We will first ask you to give us contact information. We'll ask you to provide the name of a representative that, if needed, we can get in touch with to ask a question. This will be the point person for your application. So ensuring that information is correct and that's the person you want all questions to go to is important. There are some things to upload. So even if you are turning in, for example, your W-9 and your vendor registration early, we will ask you to upload them again here. Okay. We get into eligibility and a few questions around some of the eligibility requirements to ensure that you are an eligible applicant. I think it's important here to note that by checking this, you are affirming that the following information is true regarding your school. Okay, here's the question about whether or not you received or that you are not applying for and will not receive a payroll protection program loan on or after December 27th, 2020. Again, if you did apply and receive that funding prior to December 27th, you are allowed to apply for this program. However, if you applied and or received after December 22nd, you would not be eligible for this funding. You also must ensure that the services or assistance for which you are requesting support or reimbursement have not already been supported by a loan under the PPP, the Payroll Protection Program. In other words, you are not requesting double reimbursement, for example, for items that have already been funded. And this is the question we added, that you are ensuring that the grades that you are serving in your school are somewhere from K to 12th grade. In this section, we ask you to tell us what your total student enrollment is from K to 12, and then the number of students from low-income families in grades K to 12. These numbers do come from the 1920 school year. That date is there because you had to be in existence during the 1920 school year in order to apply. And we also are going to ask you to tell us how you came about your low income data. What source of data did you use? If you look here, we do tell you what the acceptable forms of data would be, starting with this paragraph here all the way here. Okay. A lot of people are going to be able to use something like free and reduced lunch data or scholarship data, but there are other sources of data that may be used in order to determine the number of low-income students within your school. We'll ask you from there to give us a percentage of total students from low-income families. So that will be, Matthew, I think that might be something we need to correct, because we're going to say 12 divided by 11, I think, and our question says 8 by 9. So we'll make that fix and get it posted. But essentially, you are taking the number of low-income students divided by the number of your total enrollment in order to get that percentage. So question 15, we are asking you whether or not you received a payroll protection loan prior to December 27th. And question 16, if yes, what was the amount of that? Okay, question 18 is kind of what I spoke about a couple times during the presentation piece. We are asking you in question 18 to describe the impact of COVID-19 on the non-public school. So we are asking you to describe things like loss of tuition revenue, decrease in enrollment, lack of capacity to provide remote learning, data documenting the extent of learning loss. So those types of things that might have been impacted by COVID-19. Question 19, we want to know whether or not the school received equitable services from an LEA previously under the CARES Act. Matthew, do you want to talk about these last two sections a little bit? I think you did a great job yesterday. Would you be okay with that?
Sure. So the last two sections of the application are asking you to describe items that you've already purchased that you would like to request reimbursement for, and then the second section is asking you to look forward through the rest of the school year and describe the items that you continue to need moving forward. So you can ask for reimbursement of allowable items back to the start of the pandemic, or you can ask for new items starting now moving forward, or I guess it's December, that December date moving forward. So you can ask for new items and reimbursement. You'll also hear and see in some of our materials, we will occasionally talk about reimbursement of new purchased items. And so that's still in your looking forward section of your application, but that's more of a procedural reimbursement for new things. So let me give a couple of examples. Let's say that in August or in January, you purchased new items, new computers for your school so that you could facilitate some hybrid learning, and you want reimbursement from that. Then you're going to submit to us the information related to your reimbursement. You're going to put that in your reimbursement section of your application, and you're going to say, we bought this many computers in order to facilitate remote learning. We want reimbursement for our computers, and we'll process that reimbursement for you. Let's say that you now are looking forward and you see that you need 10 new computers in order to facilitate that learning. That's going to go in your new services or assistance request. Through that request, then, we can buy those 10 computers for you, or you can buy those 10 computers and apply for reimbursement for your new item. So that's a procedural reimbursement as opposed to a looking backwards reimbursement. So there's been a little bit of confusion about that, and hopefully that example helps to clarify. I also want to say while I'm talking, we've got a few hands raised. All of our participants are muted. So if you will use the chat to ask your questions, and then we'll make sure that those get addressed either in the chat or when we wrap up here in a minute, we'll start to address some questions verbally.
Yeah, so Matthew, just to add to that, if you are looking forward and looking towards some new reimbursements, we would ask you to describe in that narrative box whether or not you are asking us to administer services. So you're asking us to make the purchases and ensure that things get to you, or B, whether you want to make those purchases on your own and will at a later time ask for that reimbursement. Correct?
That is correct.
Okay. We also, in each of the sections, ask you to describe how the assistance or services will meet the needs of your school. So again, you're relating those back to the impacts of COVID-19, and you're telling us we need these 10 computers because we're trying to get to, let's say, a one-to-one initiative for remote learning, and this would complete our student computer requests. And lastly, we're going to ask you in each section to give us an amount for each category that you would like to request services or assistance in. So, for example, in supplies to sanitize, disinfect, and clean, if you wanted to do something in that category and it was $5,000, you would list that as $5,000 here. If you were looking for educational technology in the amount of $20,000, that amount would go here. So I think the point is you can do multiple, you can take advantage of the multitude of these spending categories, and you are not just limited to picking and choosing one of the categories to receive services from. So we have a little bit of time. Matthew and Karen or Thelma, do you have any additional information that you want to share at this point?
Yeah, David, there is one question in the chat that I want to address out loud. And please continue to drop questions in the chat. We have a whole team behind the scenes that's monitoring those questions and making sure that we can give you the best answer as quickly as possible. The one question I want to address out loud right now is related to funding staff. So when you're thinking about staff, you have this EANS program and you have that PPP program. Moving forward, you cannot have both. So if you apply for a new PPP loan after that December, I think it's December 27th date when this EANS program was created, you can't have EANS dollars. You can only have one or the other. So I think that's an internal decision and conversation that you need to have. If your school is considering, if let's say you only want staff, that's what you want to spend your money on, then you need to go back and look and see what can we get in a PPP loan versus what can we get through the EANS program, and really make a careful decision there because you can't have both. So there's a little nuance to that, using staff in EANS versus PPP.
We've got some questions in the chat. I can start reading those off for you, David, so you can. The first one that we had received, do we have an end date for how far forward we will be able to request future reimbursement?
Well, we have to have things obligated within 6 months. Thelma, what is the end date for this particular project? And will that?
Oh, sorry. Oh, I was muted. Sorry. September 30th, 2023.
September 30th, 2023. So do we know what the date that we're going to be, are we going to be closing out on September 30th, 2023, or?
So all purchases or POs must be generated by September 30th, 2023. And then you'll have about 45 days to pay those out and so that we can get those items ordered, purchased, and paid so that we can close out the grant at KDE.
So to give you an example, Thelma, if they want to request things for the next two summers, let's say school extension programs for the next two summers, they can do that. We just have to have that approved and ready to be spent with our application process.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, David, we've got another one. Can these funds be used for staff? And Matthew may have already addressed this. If a parish received PPP on the first round, does that need to be written for the school? They pay our salaries and own our building.
Matthew, do you want to address that one in more detail? I think you kind of hit on it that if staff was funded under the PPP program, it could not be funded. It could not be doubled up with this program, but they could potentially hire additional staff that were not funded or fund beyond what the ability of the PPP loan would have. Correct?
Yes, that's correct. And those are questions that are going to be very site specific. And so you're welcome to send those to the ombudsman email address inbox, and we'll be able to answer those site specific questions with a little more detail.
Okay, we've got could summer remediation and tutoring services for students be included in this?
Yes, absolutely. Those would be allowable under the learning loss categories.
Okay. And again, additional staff, we had to hire an additional part-time janitor due to COVID. So I would say that's a
Yeah, I would agree.
okay as well.
I would
Okay.
agree.
May we use funds for special instructional programs for students who need remediation? Can the funds pay for staff salaries to operate the supplemental programs?
Yes, I would
Yes.
say yes to that. Any type of remote learning program or
Mhm.
technology to support that. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And if we did not apply for PPP, can we retroactively apply for staff reimbursement?
I think so, Karen, but let's maybe clarify
Okay.
that. I think so, yes.
Okay. Is it possible to be reimbursed for professional cleaning services that were implemented due to COVID-related increased sanitation, or do these service providers have to be employees of KDE?
They do not have to be employees of KDE. This program follows. This is a person that sounds like they have operated under other federal programs. The employee does not have to be a KDE employee in this case, unless you ask us to administer those services for you. Then we would have to contract with somebody to provide those particular services.
Okay.
You could be reimbursed for those if they haven't been reimbursed through another program, though.
Okay, gotcha. What type of certification do you need in question 2?
Question 2. Let me go back to the application and take a look.
Okay.
David, that's referring to the signed signature page.
Okay.
So you're just going to go to that EANS website. You're going to download 3 documents. It's going to be a signature page, a W-9, and an easy vendor registration. All 3 of those have to be uploaded with your application.
Okay. If we are a preschool 12th grade program and our preschool has an existing Kentucky vendor registration, do we need to apply for a new vendor number? And the answer is no. If you have an existing KY vendor number with Kentucky Department of Education, you do not need to complete that step. Matthew or David, how do we want them to relay that information to us?
Could they submit an email through that box? Potentially, Karen, would that suffice?
Just
Or
saying,
maybe
Go ahead, Thelma.
I'm sorry. Maybe on the easy form, they can make a notation that they have an existing number, and it would be great if you can just fill out the form, but put your K number on there,
That sounds
KY
good.
number on there. Yes.
That's good. Thank you, Thelma.
Yeah, it's important to know it will not accept your application without that
Mhm.
form attached. So if you've already got one, that's great. That saves everybody a lot of time, but go ahead and submit that for us.
Thank you. Question, can we get lost tuition?
I do not think that would fit under any of the allowable categories. I think you could support things that, as a result of lost tuition, that you could not support otherwise. For example, additional cleaning services, additional technology. So lost tuition equals less dollars in your pocket. And because of that, you could not get all the technology you wanted, but I do not believe you can apply for lost tuition in itself. It could be the cause of your application, but not what you get in result.
Thank you.
Yeah, to summarize that, we have to give you stuff or we have to reimburse you for stuff you already bought.
Yes.
Okay. With title funding, we receive an update monthly about the monies that we still have available. Will we receive updates on our funding through EANS?
Karen, do you want to address that?
Thelma, what
That
is your, yeah, go ahead.
That's something we're still working out that
Mhm.
piece on, but we will be tracking expenditures per school, depending on how those applications come in. So we'll develop something, come up with a process so that you will know what your available balances are.
Thank you. Our schools are tuition based. May we still charge fees for supplemental programs and use funds to pay teacher salaries for the extra programs?
Clarification on that. Are we talking about teachers' salaries, for example, for tutoring or additional direct support to students?
I'm not sure what they mean by supplemental. I'm assuming supplemental, outside of whether it be summer school or after school or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yes. So if it is things like that that align with combating learning loss, teachers' salaries would be okay to spend under that category.
Okay, thank you. If we have applied for FEMA money but have not yet received any notification or receipt or approval, can some of these expenses that may be eligible be applied for under this program?
To my knowledge, there's no connection to FEMA money here, so I don't think you would be able to double up on those for reimbursements or to pay for those. But Matthew, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think generally federal dollars cannot be double upped on. So if you applied for funds in one place, you are not able to apply for those apply for funds for the same thing. Um, the only program that has a specific prohibition tied to EANS is the PPP program. But of course, all the other federal regulations and statutes still apply. So that's where that double up comes into play. Um, so I mean, I think you just need to kind of look and see, what you asked for in your FEMA application, what's allowable under this application, and did you ask for 100% of that funding in your FEMA application? If you did, then you probably shouldn't put it in this application too. So you're going to have to use a little judgment. That's another one of those really site-specific questions. And so that's a great example of a question that can come to us through EANS where we can go back and forth. I mean, not through the EANS email, through the non-public school ombudsman email. I'm sorry for that. And we can really go back and forth and get the clarity and follow-up questions that we need to answer that question.
Okay, thank you. So I've got a question, just trying to clarify. So as long as we submit this initial application, there will be a process to request again in the future. We don't have to include everything on this application.
Karen, I think the answer to that is yes, you do need to include everything on this application. Because within 6 months, we do have to have these funds obligated, even if it's for services to be provided in 2 summers. We have to have those funds obligated for that particular activity within 6 months. So after that 6-month period, no, we are not going to be able to offer an additional chance to apply. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would. Absolutely. We have a question about summer services. Can we pay a staff person for those remediation services, which I believe that's yes. And how will that
Yes.
work? We pay them and then get reimbursed from EANS?
I think that depends on whether or not you want to administer those services yourself or have us administer those. In my opinion, it would be better for you to administer those services yourself, because if not, we have to administer and we have to hire staff to do that. So that person in that case is either contracted or an employee of the Kentucky Department of Education. So I think it would be beneficial to ask for reimbursement for that on your end.
Okay. If there is more money after everyone gets their $400, will we have an opportunity to apply again?
Karen, any thoughts on that?
I don't, David, I don't know what, I mean, I don't know that we have the ability and the time to do that. I mean, what do you think with the timelines that we've been given from US Ed? I'm not sure that we could get a second phase or a second round. So it's not our intention to do a phase 2.
I would agree with that. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay. If we hired extra people to be monitors in a classroom because the teacher was teaching remotely from home, can we apply to be reimbursed for the monitor's pay?
Repeat that one, please.
Okay. If we hired extra people to be monitors in a classroom because the teacher was teaching remotely from home, can we apply to be reimbursed for the monitor's pay?
That would depend on whether or not you can make a case for it to fall under one of those spending categories, I think, and whether or not the intent was to be able to respond to or prepare for and respond to the impacts of COVID-19. I think we need to probably we need to probably provide for some clarification in that in the FAQs, Karen.
Okay.
I think that's a deeper question than just a yes or no.
Agree. And like Matthew said, if you have a site-specific question, you want to go ahead and get that to us. We can look at that on a case-by-case basis. Okay, let me see here what we've got. And Robin Kinney, our Associate Commissioner in Office and Finance and Operations, has put a comment about FEMA, just saying that FEMA does not generally allow for the reimbursement of expenses that can be covered under another federal program, which is why so many entities are having difficulty getting FEMA relief because there are so many other fund sources that may cover their cost. So in regards to the FEMA question, that's something that I think you would probably really need to look at individually for your school. May we hire a remediation teacher for the 21-22 school year to work with students who experience learning loss and pay their salary with these funds?
Yes.
Would the reimbursement for salaries for remediation teachers include total salary and payroll taxes?
Yes, I would say
Yes.
that should include salary and benefits and taxes. Yes. Mhm.
Okay. So this is a follow-up. If it is best for us to administer our own summer program for remediation and pay our person, do we go on and allocate proposed dollars in our application, pay our person during the summer, and then submit the documentation for reimbursement? Do we do that bi-weekly, each month, wait till the end of summer?
Karen and Thelma, that might be you all.
Wait.
How
Read it.
often? Go ahead.
Read the
How
question.
often are they going to be asking for reimbursement at the end of their project for each individual cost, or quarterly, or what?
Thank you. If the best time in the sales pay our person during person, pay the person during the summer, and then submit the documentation for the reimbursement. I would say, to ease the burden, you can either submit your reimbursement at the end of the summer program, or because I think bi-weekly, dealing with the volume that we would be dealing with, I think either monthly or let me see, what did you say? Or wait till the end of the summer. I think monthly would be sufficient, because we don't want you all to really be out, if say quarterly, because most of our reimbursement process is on a quarterly basis for most of our federal. So I think monthly would be sufficient.
Yeah, and Thelma,
Karen, what
that
do you think? I mean,
might be something we want to add to our FAQs too.
okay.
And if I can add to that real quick, David, before we move on. So there's a planning component to that too, right? So there's going to be lag time between when you request that reimbursement and you receive that check. So if you're looking at your budget and you're seeing that you're going to have to request and receive reimbursement every 2 weeks for a salary, then really we need to administer that for you. And that person needs to be really like a KDE employee on paper, because you're going to run out of money before we can get a check back to you for reimbursement. So depending on what the cash flow looks like within your private school, you're going to have to kind of think about, is it best for me? Can I wait for this reimbursement, or is it better for KDE to administer this program for me?
That's a very good point, Matthew.
Okay, we've got some other questions. I apologize. I got kicked off the meeting, so had to leave and come back. So um, have you all talked any more about, were you all still on the same question that we were on
Yes.
when, okay. So the next one is, how long will it take before we know if our request is approved?
I would say it could be up to 30 days. Thelma, are we planning to send out a letter of award or something of that nature?
So I think this is talking about particular purchases, but yes, once all of the applications have been approved, they will receive an award notification stating that you received what the award was, with the reimbursement process would be, and some other procurement information along with that. But as far as particular items, it just depends on the type of item. Because our um, procurement laws are a little different. So some we may have to get bids for some items. Karen, anything else?
No, I don't think so. I think
Yeah.
that, yeah, it's just going to be, we're going to need the time um, to follow the proper procurement law. So yes, I agree with you, Thelma.
Mhm.
Okay, so we have a question. Am I correct in thinking that anyone who receives financial assistance at our school will qualify us for the extra $250?
Yeah, that's correct. As anybody that receives, for example, tuition assistance would be That's one of the measures you can use as your low income measure. So yes.
Okay. And would the amount per person increase from the $400 for this round if money is available, if some schools do not participate, which would allow more money for the ones that do? You know, we haven't gone there, you know, David, we haven't really talked about that, because we really don't know what the applications will look like, what we'll receive. So that conversation is ongoing as the application process unfolds.
And I think at that point, I might be wrong about this, but will we not have to consult with the governor at that point?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I believe so. Question about providing funds be used to provide additional counseling for students experience hardships due to COVID, emotional anxiety.
Yes, I think you could make a
Mhm.
case that there's a connection to learning loss and student needs there. So yes, I believe that these funds could be used for those types of things.
Okay. Can we pay someone to manage spending these funds for us?
Sort of like administrative
Mhm.
costs.
What it sounds
I
like.
would say no. I would say no. That does
Yeah.
not fall under the allowable categories.
I agree with that. Yes, today and yesterday's recordings are being recorded, and they'll be available on our website. David, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. We're
Matthew,
going to pick
okay.
one of them to post. Whichever one we feel is the best, we'll put out there.
Okay. And I believe yes to this, can the funds be used to hire resource personnel to support students who are experiencing delays in learning due to being out for so long?
Yeah, absolutely. That
Mhm.
connects to learning loss.
When purchasing technology, must we choose KETS approved technology using KETS approved vendors? So if KDE procures the computers for you, then we definitely will go through the state master agreement process to see what IT companies we have state master agreements with. So instead of you saying I want you may ask for the Cadillac, but we may give you the Camry because it's on state master agreement. So that's yes. Hope that helps. And then Robin has put in, as a reminder, reimbursement request should be reasonable, necessary, and allowable. As you prepare your anticipated budgets, please keep that in mind. Matthew, I don't see any other questions right now. Do you see any more, anything that we've missed?
Can I see that the hand raised icon is on, but I can't see who it is. Can
It's
any of you see on
yeah,
your end?
Kathy Cornett. Okay, Kathy, since she
Everyone
does,
is muted, so you have to put your comment in the chat box.
I think she's saying I don't have chat.
Oh, we don't have chat.
Mm-hmm.
Then I think, Kathy, the best thing we can do for you right now is to ask you to email your question to us, and then we'll get back to you as quickly as possible. There's no way for us, once the meeting has started, to unmute after we've like locked down the mute situation. So if you can email us your question, we'll answer it today.
Okay, we do have a couple more that's come in. We use a third-party processor for families to apply for tuition assistance. So if a student is eligible per the third party, we can count this student as low income.
Yes.
Okay. Can we buy laptops ourselves and be reimbursed?
Yes, you can.
Do we need to submit a W-4? I'm sorry, I think she means W-9 for a cleaning vendor. So the only W-9 we need is to establish your non-public school as a vendor in EMARS. If you utilize services from another vendor and are going to pay them with your EANS money, then no, we don't need a W-9 for them. Have I said that correctly, guys?
Yeah, but I do
Correct.
think, to clarify, Karen, when it comes to reimbursements, we will probably be asking for additional documentation.
Correct. Yes.
Invoices, detailed receipts, those types of things in order to process reimbursements.
Yeah. I don't see any other questions at this time.
Okay, if it looks like they're falling off, I think maybe we can wrap it up, Karen. And if
Okay.
there are additional questions that come up, we can get those through the KPSO mailbox.
Okay.
Matthew George says, do we have to get quotes? In order to determine what is a reasonable cost, Karen, we probably are not going to be asking for quotes. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
But it might be in your best interest to just kind of shop things around a little bit to ensure that the cost is reasonable. Yeah, just like Robin said. There's another one, if we have had additional tuition assistance because of COVID, can we claim that? And I do not believe that you would be able to claim that as one of the allowable categories. Do you think we're okay to wrap up at this point, Karen?
I do. I mean, there's nothing, we've had a few stragglers come in, but quiet right now.
Okay, so if you do have additional questions after we wrap everything up, please send those to the KPSO email address. I would suggest checking back frequently to the EANS webpage just for additional information, FAQs, those types of things. We do want to thank you for joining us today. And again, any questions are welcome after this. Please don't hesitate to ask. And we'll wrap it up with that. So thank you all very much.
Thanks, everyone.